I have had a problem. I steal.
At 56, Nicole Kidman did not break down. She broke through. For decades, the world saw porcelain skin, icy elegance, and a voice so measured it could calm storms. But behind the flawless red carpet gowns and statuesque poses lived a woman unraveling quietly, a woman who smiled through heartbreak, who whispered truths through characters, who carried pain too complex for tabloid headlines. Now, at 56, she has finally said what we all suspected, and it is not just about Tom. It is not just about the roles. It is about the cost of being perfect for too long. This is not a scandal. It is a reckoning. Because when Nicole spoke, she did not whisper anymore. She looked the world in the eye and said, "I was not okay. I just knew how to hide." You think you know Nicole Kidman? You have only seen the mask. Now, step inside the story she has spent a lifetime trying not to tell. The porcelain girl who never felt safe. Long before the golden statues, before the designer gowns and camera flashes, Nicole Kidman was just a quiet girl with a face too pale for the sun and dreams too big for the world around her. Born in Hawaii but raised in Australia, she was the daughter of intellectuals. Her father, a psychologist. Her mother, a nursing instructor. Emotion in her household was not absent, but it was contained, studied, dissected. Love was structured. Pain was managed. Silence was often safer than expression. And Nicole, tall and shy with flaming red hair, quickly learned how to disappear in plain sight. School was not a sanctuary, it was a stage of judgment. Her appearance made her a target. She was called names. Her skin was mocked. Her awkwardness made her an easy punchline. But beneath the humiliation, something was taking root. Not bitterness, not defiance, something softer. A fascination with the idea of transformation. If she could not change how people saw her, maybe she could become someone else entirely. And that is when she found the theater. Acting was not performance for her. It was oxygen. It was the one place where vulnerability was not weakness, it was currency. In the dim lights of community stages and school productions, Nicole came alive. She did not pretend to be someone else. She escaped into them. Every character she played was a shelter, a shield, a chance to speak without being judged. She was not chasing fame. She was chasing safety, chasing the feeling of being seen without pain. By the time she was a teenager, it was clear there was something extraordinary in her, a presence that could not be taught. She trained at the Phillip Street Theater alongside future stars, but even then, she stood out, not just for her looks, but for her hunger. She studied her roles like puzzles, poured herself into them until there was nothing left. She once said she felt more real inside her characters than in her own skin. That was not metaphor, it was truth. The girl she played on stage was always braver than the girl she was in life. Her first roles came quickly. A television movie here, a supporting part there. But even when the camera panned past her, something lingered. That strange blend of fragility and force. It was like watching someone both disappear and dominate at the same time. And people noticed, the industry noticed, but they did not see the girl. They saw the surface, the elegance, the classical beauty. They called her poised, graceful, icy. And the deeper she buried herself in roles, the more the world built a story about her that had nothing to do with who she truly was. Nicole Kidman had entered the spotlight, but she did not walk into it. She flinched, because behind the poised silhouette was still the quiet girl who never felt safe, and no one was asking how she had learned to smile so perfectly while carrying silence like a second skin. Falling in love with make-believe. She was barely out of her teens when she realized the only place she truly belonged was somewhere else entirely. On a film set, under lights that did not expose but transformed, Nicole found sanctuary. The silence she had lived with for years turned into dialogue. The emotions she had buried began to surface, not in therapy or confession, but in characters. Make-believe was not childish to her. It was sacred, a way to feel without the fear of consequence, a way to bleed without the bruise. Her early work was raw and promising. There was a hunger behind her eyes that could not be coached. In Bush Christmas and BMX Bandits, there were flickers of something electric, even if the scripts were light. But it was in Dead Calm, the psychological thriller that launched her into global attention, that the world finally paused to watch. The film was a slow burn, a woman trapped on a boat, a face that barely flinched. But inside that stillness, Nicole poured herself into every glance and breath. She was not acting, she was confessing in silence, and directors began to notice. They did not just see a beautiful young woman. They saw control, they saw intelligence, they saw a mystery begging to be unraveled. But behind the curtain, the girl who once felt invisible was still trying to believe she deserved to be seen. Praise made her uncomfortable. Fame felt like a borrowed coat, beautiful but ill-fitting. She smiled for cameras and signed autographs, but part of her still believed it was temporary, that if she let her guard down, they would all realize she did not belong. Then came the call that would change everything. Tom Cruise, the biggest star in the world, had seen dead calm and wanted to meet her, to act with her, to know her. She was 22. He was already a phenomenon. Their chemistry on the set of Days of Thunder was undeniable, and before the premiere even hit theaters, they were inseparable. To the world, it looked like a fairy tale. The quiet Australian girl rescued by Hollywood royalty. But fairy tales always leave out the parts that are too difficult to explain. Nicole never chased him. She never hunted stardom through love, but love, or the idea of it, swept her off her feet, and suddenly, she was not just acting in films, she was acting in life, learning how to be the wife of a man everyone worshipped, learning how to speak less, smile more, disappear gently behind the glow of someone else's fame. It was not a script she had written, but she played the part anyway. Make-believe had always been her safe place, but now the lines were blurring, and the girl who had once used acting to find herself was about to lose herself inside a role that looked like love from the outside and control from within. The porcelain girl was still there, but the mask was settling into her skin. Tom, control, and the girl the world misunderstood. She had always known how to disappear into a role, but being married to Tom Cruise was not a role she could shed after the director yelled cut. At 23, Nicole stepped into a world where cameras never turned off and affection was always on display. To the public, they were the golden couple, a perfect fusion of Hollywood royalty and quiet elegance. But inside the bubble, reality twisted into performance. The lines between self and illusion blurred until she could no longer tell where Nicole ended and the wife began. Tom was not cruel. He was captivating. He was the sun in every room, the force that turned heads and decided direction. And in his orbit, Nicole learned quickly that love came with expectations. There was a rhythm to their life together. Appear when asked, smile when needed, stay silent when it mattered most. She adjusted, not out of fear, but survival. To love him was to adapt. To remain with him was to sacrifice pieces of herself so quietly that even she did not notice how much had been chipped away. They adopted 2 children together. She loved them with a devotion she rarely spoke about. But even that sacred space began to shift under the pressure of their world. The children were raised within Tom's deepening ties to Scientology. And Nicole, quiet and questioning, found herself on the outside of something she could not name. She played along. She showed up. But something in her eyes grew distant. Interviews from that time show a woman who smiled with her lips, but rarely with her eyes. The world misunderstood her. They called her lucky. They called her cold. They called her the silent shadow of a superstar. But they never called her what she truly was. Trapped, not in violence, not in scandal, but in the slow suffocation of a life that looked like gold and felt like glass. Every red carpet was a performance, every interview rehearsed. She once said that she felt like a bird in a gilded cage, beautiful, admired, but unable to fly. And yet she stayed, not because she was weak, but because she believed in love. She believed in commitment. And when you grow up learning how to silence your own voice, you do not always recognize when it has gone completely missing. Nicole had learned how to endure, how to smile through it, how to say she was fine even when the mirror no longer reflected anything she recognized. The public adored the image, the tall, graceful woman beside the brightest star in Hollywood. But behind closed doors, Nicole Kidman was vanishing, not dramatically, quietly, a little more with each passing year. Until one morning after nearly 11 years of marriage, Tom told her it was over. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. And for the first time, Nicole was forced to face the woman beneath the mask, and she did not know who she was anymore. The divorce that shattered her and set her free. The world found out before she did. That was the part she never forgot. One moment she was planning dinner. The next, her marriage was over. Tom had filed for divorce. No discussion, no final argument, no long unraveling. Just silence, sharp and cold, delivered like a verdict. Nicole was 33. The marriage had lasted nearly 11 years. And now it was gone, evaporated with a signature and a press release. She stood in her home alone, stunned, confused, trying to understand how everything that had once felt permanent could vanish overnight. The press had a field day. They called her blindsided. They called her abandoned. But they did not call her grieving, because grief is not always loud. Sometimes it is just a woman sitting at the edge of a bed that still smells like someone who has decided never to return. She did not speak out. She did not defend herself. She curled inward, letting the weight of years of silence finally collapse on top of her. For the first time in a long time, there was no script to follow. She cried, not in public, not for the cameras, but in the quiet hours between sleep and waking, when memories came uninvited. She once said it felt like someone had taken her life and erased half of it without asking permission. The children stayed with Tom. The church she had never fully entered closed its doors to her. And the woman who had once been praised as one half of the most powerful couple in Hollywood was now alone, holding pieces of a self she no longer recognized. But grief does strange things. It strips away what no longer serves. It burns through the illusions. And in the ashes, something unexpected began to stir. Freedom, not the kind that comes with celebration, but the kind that sneaks in through the cracks, the kind that feels like fresh air after years underground. She started saying no. She started choosing roles that scared her. She started dressing for herself, speaking less carefully, walking into rooms without permission. Not because she was healed, but because she had nothing left to lose. The divorce shattered her, but it also broke the mirror she had been forced to live inside. And when the shards settled, she saw herself differently, not as the porcelain doll beside a star. She did not roar, she did not rage, she just kept going. And in that quiet persistence, she found something stronger than love. She found herself. Hollywood had expected her to retreat, to soften, to vanish. But Nicole Kidman was done disappearing. The heartbreak had not destroyed her, it had refined her. And what came next would not just change her career, it would finally show the world who she had been all along. From doll to danger, Nicole's darkest roles. She could have faded. That was what most expected. A divorce that public, a heartbreak that deep should have ended the story. But for Nicole Kidman, it was just the beginning. The silence that once defined her became her power. And in that silence, she chose a new kind of role. No longer the elegant wife or soft-spoken beauty. She wanted danger. She wanted mess. She wanted to bleed on screen in a way she never had in real life. She stopped playing characters who needed to be saved. She became the storm. Directors were hesitant at first. They still saw the delicate features, the refined accent, the restraint. But Nicole began to break that image apart, piece by piece. In the others, she played a haunted mother unraveling beneath the weight of grief and guilt. Her performance was eerie, aching, unforgettable. It was not just acting, it was exorcism. She poured every ounce of hidden sorrow into the role, and the screen could barely contain her. Then came Birth. A film so strange, so unsettling, that audiences did not know how to process it. Nicole did not care. She was no longer acting for approval. She was acting for release. Her eyes in that film carried the weight of everything she had lost. Every scene was a quiet rebellion against the version of herself the world had once celebrated. She was telling the truth now, even if it made people uncomfortable. And then, The Hours. Virginia Woolf, a woman drowning in her mind while trying to keep up appearances. Nicole wore a prosthetic nose. She changed her gait. But the real transformation was internal. Every moment on screen felt like a confession. Not just from Woolf, but from Nicole herself. She was not hiding her pain. She was speaking through it, and the world finally stopped and listened. She won the Academy Award, but when she stood on that stage, statue in hand, she looked almost lost, because the wind did not erase the ache. It only confirmed that the ache was real. This was not reinvention. This was revelation. Nicole had stepped out of the shadow of being someone's wife and into the full weight of her own identity. And that identity was complex, beautiful, yes, but also fractured, fearless, and finally honest. The roles kept coming, darker, sharper, more layered. She said yes to stories most actresses feared. She embraced characters that were difficult to love, because in doing so she was learning to love the parts of herself she had long kept hidden. From doll to danger, from silence to storm, Nicole Kidman was no longer the girl who made herself small to fit the frame. She was the frame, and with every role she took, she was writing a new story. One where the woman was not rescued. She was the one holding the fire, and she had only just begun to burn. The Oscar that was not enough. She stood on the stage with the Oscar in her hand, the crowd rising to its feet, her name echoing through the grand hall. The golden statue caught the light, but her face told another story. Nicole smiled, yes. She thanked the Academy. She spoke with grace, but inside she felt hollow. The applause was thunderous yet strangely distant, because in that moment of career triumph, she was still haunted by everything she had lost to get there. The Oscar was for the hours, but it felt like an award for her suffering. It had taken pain to get the part, and pain to survive it, and now here she was, holding the prize, wondering why it did not feel like healing. She had hoped it would mark a turning point, that the world would finally see her not as an accessory, not as a muse, but as an artist. But as the curtain fell and the cameras stopped flashing, Nicole was left with a quiet truth. The statue was cold. It did not hold her. It did not love her back. In interviews, she tried to sound grateful, and she was. But there was something else beneath the surface, a whisper that even with all the recognition, she still felt unclaimed, not by the industry, not by the audience, but by herself. She once said that success is strange when you have no one to come home to. That winning felt like shouting into an empty room. She began to drift. Not professionally, she worked constantly, film after film, role after role. But personally, she floated in a kind of emotional limbo. She had fame, she had admiration, but the intimacy she craved remained just out of reach. She dated quietly, she traveled often, nothing rooted. She had spent so many years becoming what the world wanted, she had almost forgotten what she wanted for herself. Her relationship with her children remained complicated. She rarely spoke about it, choosing privacy over explanation. But the silence said enough. There were wounds no award could mend. She buried herself in work, in craft, in characters that allowed her to say what she could not say in her own voice, and the performances remained astonishing, raw, controlled, brilliant, but behind the curtain the ache lingered. The Oscar had been a dream, but it was not salvation. It was a moment, beautiful, yes, but fleeting. Nicole had learned that applause fades quickly, and when it does, you are left alone with yourself. What she found in that quiet was not satisfaction, it was yearning, a soft, persistent ache to be held, to be known, to be seen not through a lens or a script, but for real. For once, she had conquered Hollywood, but she had not yet found home, and without it, every success felt like standing on a mountaintop alone, surrounded by clouds. She was still searching, not for roles, but for rest. Love, again, but on her terms. She had spent so long performing strength that it nearly became a prison. The Oscar was behind her. The applause had faded. And Nicole Kidman, now in her late 30s, stood on the edge of something unfamiliar, vulnerability. The kind that did not come from a script, the kind that was not crafted for camera angles or costume fittings, the kind that asked nothing but honesty. And that was when Keith Urban entered the frame, not as a grand gesture, not as a perfect answer, just a man who saw the woman, not the myth. They met in 2005. He was a country music star with his own shadows, addiction, recovery, pain disguised as charm. Nicole had every reason to keep her guard up. She had lived through the cost of loving someone larger than life, but there was something quiet in Keith, something that did not pull her into orbit but walked beside her. They were different, two paths that seemed unlikely to meet, but that was the miracle. For the first time, she was not adapting to someone else's story. She was writing a new one. Their courtship was slow, careful, almost shy. Nicole did not speak about it in the press. She protected it like something sacred, because it was. This was not a performance. This was a rebuild. They married in 2006 in a candlelit ceremony in Sydney. It was not about headlines. It was about healing. A moment just for them, away from the lenses that had so often distorted her truth. But love, even real love, is not without weight. Keith's battle with addiction resurfaced soon after the wedding. Nicole did not run. She stayed. She checked him into rehab. She showed up, not with drama, not with declarations, but with steadiness. She said later that she married for love and meant it. She also said she believed people can change when they are truly seen, and maybe that is what saved them both. They saw each other. Their marriage was not perfect. It was human. And in that humanity, Nicole began to find her way back to herself. She softened. She laughed more. She allowed herself to be held, not as a symbol, not as a star, but as a woman. They had 2 daughters together, and with them came something she had long been denied: a chance to raise children without the glare, without the noise, with gentleness. She did not retreat from acting, but now she returned to the world not just as a performer, but as someone who had chosen love and had been chosen back. Keith never asked her to shrink, never stood in her light, and in that rare kind of love, Nicole bloomed. This was not a sequel to the story that came before. This was a new beginning, a chapter written not from survival, but from choice. And in that choice, Nicole Kidman began to understand that the truest form of power is not found in being admired. It is found in being loved exactly as you are. The children she raised in silence. She rarely spoke about them, not in interviews, not on red carpets, not even when the questions were carefully worded and softly delivered. Nicole Kidman, the woman who had opened her soul on screen and allowed herself to bleed in front of millions, kept one part of her life sealed like a locked room in a house full of open windows. Her adopted children, Isabella and Connor, were always there in the background. But as the years passed, the space between them and Nicole only seemed to grow wider. She had adopted them with Tom, a daughter in 1992, a son in 1995. In those early years, she was hands-on, private, but devoted. The kind of mother who read bedtime stories and whispered, "I love yous" between flights. But when the divorce came, everything fractured. The children stayed with Tom. They remained inside the tight circle of Scientology, and slowly Nicole was pushed further away, not by choice, but by circumstance. The religion did not consider her one of them, and neither, eventually, did her own children. The world noticed their absence, at premieres, at milestones, at weddings and holidays, but Nicole never explained. She never corrected the speculation or fed the gossip. When pressed, she answered with grace. She said she loved them, that they were old enough to make their own decisions, that she gave them space. What she did not say, but what could be read in the tremble of her voice and the distance in her eyes, was that her heart ached quietly every day for the children she could no longer reach. Motherhood for her was not about control. It was about presence. And now, stripped of that presence, she carried the weight silently. While she raised her 2 young daughters with Keith in Nashville, Nicole never stopped holding space for the ones who had drifted away. She spoke their names with reverence, as if naming them might keep the bond from breaking completely. The pain of that loss did not show in headlines. It showed in her work. In Lion, where she played an adoptive mother searching for connection with a son who no longer felt like hers. In Big Little Lies, where her character fought to hold her children close in a world determined to tear them away. Audiences saw brilliance. What they were really witnessing was confession. Nicole was not acting. She was remembering. She once said that being a mother is not something you stop being, even if the children walk away, even if the world forgets, even if it hurts. And maybe that is the deepest truth of Nicole Kidman, that for all the roles she has played, the most difficult one has been the one no one ever applauded: the quiet mother, the distant mother, the mother who loved so deeply she chose silence over spectacle. She raised her children in different homes, in different worlds, but she loved them all the same, and she is still loving them, even in the silence, especially there. The roles that were really confessions. By the time Nicole turned 50, the world had stopped questioning her talent. She was no longer just a movie star, she was a force, the kind of actress directors chased and audiences trusted. But something had shifted. Her performances grew sharper, riskier, more intimate. There was no more need to prove herself. Now she was telling the truth, not just about the characters, about herself, One role at a time, she was writing a letter to the world, a letter she had been too afraid to send when she was younger. In Big Little Lies, she played Celeste Wright, a woman hiding bruises beneath silk dresses, a woman who smiled through abuse, who tried to rationalize pain because she thought love required it. Nicole did not play Celeste, she became her. Every whispered plea, every silent scream came from somewhere real. She once admitted that filming the violent scenes left her emotionally wrecked, that sometimes she would go home and shake, that her body could not always tell the difference between the script and the memory. Viewers praised the performance, but those who watched closely knew they were witnessing something deeper. It was not just acting, it was release. Then came Destroyer. Nicole disappeared physically, aged skin, hollow eyes, a detective broken by guilt. The character looked nothing like the Nicole audiences adored, and that was the point. She was stripping away beauty, stripping away expectation. She was not afraid to be ugly if it meant being honest. The rage in that role was not manufactured. It had been stored for years. In Rabbit Hole, she played a mother grieving the loss of her son. The ache behind her eyes was not imagined. It was drawn from the quiet absence of her own children. Her character's silence, her need to keep moving, mirrored the way Nicole had carried her own sorrow for decades. She never spoke it aloud, but every scene whispered her truth. Even in The Undoing, where she played a woman unraveling her perfect life, Nicole layered her performance with questions she had asked herself long ago. How well do you know the person you love? What do you do when everything safe falls apart? The answers were never spoken, but they were felt in the way her voice cracked, in the way her eyes searched the screen for something she might never find. These were not just roles, they were confessions, pieces of herself offered to the world, not for sympathy, but for understanding. Acting had always been her language. Now, it was her prayer, her way of saying, I am here, I have lived, I have lost, and I am still standing. Nicole Kidman was no longer hiding behind characters. She was stepping through them. And with every performance, she was telling the world not who she used to be, but who she had become. Not perfect, not polished, but finally, fully real. At 56, the mask comes off. The camera had always been her shield. Even when she was barefaced, even when the role demanded tears and bruises and breakdowns, it still offered distance. Nicole had long used her work to say what she could not say aloud. The screen became her diary, the characters her whispers. But at 56, something changed. She was no longer content to speak through fiction. She wanted to be heard as herself. It was an interview, soft and unassuming, where the question was not invasive, just honest. What have you carried that no one sees? Nicole paused, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes, always so carefully controlled, flickered with something unspoken. Then she answered, slowly, carefully, completely. She said she had spent years performing happiness, that smiling had become a habit, not always a reflection. That fame had given her everything and taken pieces she is still trying to reclaim. She said that when her marriage ended, she did not just lose a husband. She lost access to her children. That being labeled distant was easier than explaining heartbreak you are not allowed to name. That when people ask about her silence, they do not understand that some pain refuses to be made public. She said she had forgiven, even when the wounds stayed open, and that she still loves from a distance, every day. She spoke about control, how it crept into her life in small ways, the way she stood, the way she spoke, the need to be perfect so she would not be left again. How acting saved her, but also kept her hidden. That even in roles where she bled, she was still protecting something, the little girl who was always afraid to be too much or not enough. And then she smiled, a real smile, the kind that does not ask for approval. At 56, Nicole Kidman finally admitted what many had suspected, that the strength they admired was not always strength, sometimes it was survival, that the elegance they praised was sometimes armor, that her silence had never been emptiness, it was fullness too heavy to carry aloud. She said she is still learning how to speak without characters, still learning how to stand without pretending, that motherhood for her has been joy and loss in equal measure, that love has been both rescue and risk, and that she is proud. Not because she did it perfectly, but because she never stopped trying. For years, the world watched Nicole Kidman like a painting, beautiful, untouchable, but now the brushstrokes are visible. The cracks are part of the canvas. The voice is no longer hidden behind a script. It is hers. clear, unafraid, and in speaking her truth, she did not break the myth, she made it human, and that was the most powerful performance of all. Nicole Kidman, Unmasked. There was a time when Nicole Kidman could walk into a room and silence it without saying a word. The stillness, the posture, the quiet elegance, it was all by design. She knew how to create distance, how to become the version of herself the world expected. But at 56, after decades of applause and whispers, she began doing something far more difficult. She started showing up without the mask, not just on screen. In life, she no longer moved to protect an image. She moved to protect her peace. The woman who once measured every word now spoke with warmth and honesty. She no longer flinched when questions came about pain, about motherhood, about regret. She answered without apology, not for attention, not for redemption, simply because the time for silence had passed. In recent interviews, there is a softness to her that did not exist before, a kind of freedom that comes from letting go of the need to be understood. She does not try to control the narrative anymore. She allows space for mystery, for contradiction. She admits she made choices that cost her, that she hurt, that she still grieves parts of her life she cannot reclaim. But she also laughs more. There is light in her eyes again. Not the kind that performs, the kind that belongs to someone who has survived themselves. She continues to work, but with a different rhythm. The roles are chosen not for the spotlight, but for the soul. She says yes only when it matters. Her career, once the thing that held her together, now serves as an extension of who she has become. Not a mask, a mirror. She builds projects that center women, that tell the truth about love and loss and rage. She does it not because she needs to, but because she believes it matters. At home in Nashville, surrounded by family, Nicole has found something rare. Stillness. She gardens, she reads, she takes long walks without being recognized. She tucks her daughters into bed. She wakes to birds, not call times. It is not the life many imagined for her. It is better, because it is real. And still, when she walks into a room, people pause, but not because of the gowns or the grace. It is because they sense something deeper now. A woman who has stood inside fire and did not let it consume her. A woman who has loved and lost and still chooses love. A woman who once vanished behind her characters and now stands completely revealed. Nicole Kidman, Unmasked, is not softer. She is sharper, not smaller, fuller. She is no longer the porcelain figure the world placed on a pedestal. She is flesh. She is flawed. She is whole. And in the honesty of her truth, she has become more powerful than ever. Not because she stayed perfect, because she chose to be real. Nicole Kidman spent decades being watched, admired, and misunderstood. She was the porcelain doll, the silent wife, the celebrated actress, and the grieving mother, all behind carefully drawn curtains. But at 56, the performance stopped. What remained was not a star-chasing relevance, but a woman reclaiming herself. She no longer needed the mask. Her truth, raw and imperfect, became her strength. And in revealing it, she did not lose the mystique. She deepened it. Her story is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about surviving love, loss, judgment, and silence without ever letting the light inside her go out. Nicole Kidman has not just endured Hollywood, she has outgrown it. And now, as the world finally sees her not as a symbol, but as a soul, she reminds us that beauty fades, fame shifts, but truth once spoken echoes forever. And that is the story she was always meant to tell.